Good evening again, everyone. My name is Melissa Raspberry, and I am from the American Institutes for Research, and we have the honor and pleasure of managing and facilitating the CS for All Teachers community. We are so glad to have you here with us tonight for this webinar on integrating computer science in P5 Humanities, and especially grateful to have two colleagues, Michael Stone and Mary Avans, with us to help host this and provide you with the great information. I will be back behind the scenes checking out things on the chat window and just making sure that all goes well from a technical aspect. So if you run into any difficulties, do feel free to send me a message in the chat window and I will respond and assist you as needed. I'm also going to reshare the conference call-in number that we encourage you to use. You are able to do that, or you're also able to connect via microphone on your computer. We do need it. I know that a lot of webinars these days are merely sit and get, you just sit and listen, but we hope that this will be pretty participatory. Like I said, Mary and Michael have some great things to share with you, but there will be opportunity for questions and answers and for you to share your perspective, so we hope you'll take them up on that and not just contribute to the chat window, which is one possibility, but also to do it orally. We do just ask, though, if you do call in or use your microphone, that you mute yourself if you're not speaking, just to cut down on background noise, etc. So without further ado, I will turn things over to my colleagues and look forward to the great discussion. So have at it, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melissa. And this is Michael Stone. I am a former teacher, spent 10 years in the classroom in Tennessee, Southeast Tennessee, teaching math and computer science at the high school level. And during the 2015-2016 school year, I had the pleasure of getting to be a Albert Einstein Teaching Fellow at the National Science Foundation, and was blessed to get placed in Dr. Jan Cuny's office. So if you're unfamiliar, Dr. Cuny has certainly played a pivotal role in the last decade and a half in sort of spearheading the work that has led to the National CS for All initiative, and she just has really been a huge supporter, but also a convener, and really just helping to bring a lot of the critical players to the room to really help get computer science off its feet and to develop this, as she would say, this wave of momentum behind computer science nationally. In that experience, in the 2015-2016 school year, I got to travel around the country and see computer science in different school systems and what it looked like. For me, having come from high school and having taught the sort of original AP CSA course, as it's known now, it was really interesting to find out that there was just a wide range of research-based computer science courses that have been developed in the last few years that are really changing what computer science looks like. And it's hard for me in a webinar to know the audience, but I'll assume it's usually safe to assume that most people are familiar with code.org and what they've done with the Hour of Code, the new CS for All consortium, and the coalitions that are starting to form across the country. There's just there's a lot of interest and a lot of momentum, and certainly increasing interest in school districts across the country in bringing CS to K-12 education. For me, in that role, what became readily apparent was that there's been limited work done to think about developing a K-12 pipeline. So most of the research-based courses that are available right now start around 7th or 8th grade and then work through high school. And as the dad of two daughters who are in elementary school, I felt like I was ready to get them coding and starting to think about computational thinking and really doing some advanced problem solving in a contextually relevant scenarios. And I was just having a hard time finding curriculum that did that. So I worked with a former principal of mine, a couple of other colleagues, another Einstein fellow I'd met in DC during my time there. And in January of 2016, we launched a DevX, which is a national professional development company. One of the things that we do in DevX is we have written and have delivered now in a number of locations a K-5 model for computer science that really looks at integrating computer science in the daily routine for teachers. This integration piece was really important for us because we saw a number of barriers as we started thinking about what can computer science look like in a first grade or a third grade or a fourth grade classroom. We started anticipating just a number of barriers, and as we talked with more and more teachers, some specific things came out. So number one, obviously time. There's an intense focus, and an increasingly intense focus on literacy and math, and certainly we understand those skills are foundational. And again, as a dad, while I want my daughters to be able to know how to use a computer, not just for consumption, but for creation, at the end of the day, right, in second grade, it's more important that my daughter can read than that she can code. But what we wanted to find out was, is it possible to teach these core subjects, right, your math, literacy and reading, social studies, science, your cores that you have to teach, that we have state standards around in every state. Can we enhance how we teach those by using computer science? Is there any research that backs this idea? And Dr. Marina Bears at Tufts University has certainly done pioneering work in this field. People like Dr. Mitch Resnick at MIT have developed a number of tools, and the space is starting to develop, but it's definitely still in its infancy in terms of a formal curriculum and trying to think about specific strategies that can be used. So before I turn it over to Mary, I just wanted to help you sort of think about the construct that we're working on and sort of working within. And then Mary's going to share with you some specific examples and talk a little bit about her journey as a actual second grade teacher in the class, bringing coding to her students in a district that does have high testing requirements. There is still an intense focus on math and literacy, and the days for elementary teachers especially are increasingly scripted and sort of dictated to some degree. And so before I turn it over to her, I just wanted to kind of talk through how we got to this point briefly. So for us at DevX, as we're thinking about professional development in computer science, it was unique from any other subject because when we do professional development normally, we're very much so focused on teacher pedagogy and trying to think about the mindset that's required for unlocking maximum student learning during class time. We very rarely dive into content because we work under the assumption as an organization that teachers are bringing their expertise to the classroom, and it's our job to help them think of the best possible way and identify the best possible strategies to deliver that content to their students in a meaningful way so that it sticks. What we realize is that very few, if any, elementary teachers have had formal training in computer science. So it brings kind of throws an interesting cog in the wheel. So we set out to design professional development that does two things. We thought on the one hand, we needed to increase teacher competency specifically in computer science. We talked to, when we do trainings with K-5 teachers especially, we see most of the time the teachers that attend the trainings have had very limited experience with computer science, if any, and they often self-identify as, not necessarily, they don't see themselves as computer people. There's very low self-efficacy around how they view themselves and through the lens of computer science and being able to deliver computer science instruction in their classroom. So on the one hand, we know we have to help teachers develop this basic competency in computer science. On the other hand, we know that no teacher is going to teach something they're not confident in. So as that competency rises, we have structured things specifically to try to help teachers to really raise that self-efficacy, to help them start to identify some specific skills that they have and rationale behind how and why those skills will enhance the how they teach concepts that they already have to teach in their core subjects. So specifically, we're looking at things like if we have a standard in fourth grade in Tennessee, there's a state standard in science for fourth grade that talks about phases of the moon and students identifying phases of the moon. It's a unit every fourth grade teacher has to teach in their science class. Can we enhance that by integrating computer science and specifically programming or computational thinking in that? We think we can, and we've set out to start to deliver that to some extent. So for us, from the DevX perspective, as far as professional development goes, it really is about helping teachers identify conceptually what's possible and reasons to think about integrating computer science and specific ways to teach their core concepts. But practically, like there's an element here where we all go to school tomorrow and we all have students that need, excuse me, we all have students that need that have various needs, and we have to meet specific requirements from the state and from our school. And so there's a very authentic, just kind of real piece here. So we want to think about both of those, and we're trying to operate inside of those. Philip, I'm seeing the question pop up here. Teacher pre and post surveys on competency and confidence that you can share. Yeah, we do. I can share those. I don't know if I have access to share them through the webinar, but my email's above, and I'll be happy to send that to you after the webinar for sure. So with that said, that's sort of, don't mean to really to pitch the PD, but to say when we're thinking about computer science in the elementary space, we recognize there's some very specific barriers, and some of those barriers are really associated with teacher professional development and teacher training in terms of bringing this to students. Mary happened to go through one of our training sessions. This really isn't, she's really not presenting tonight to talk about that. And we certainly don't want to take credit because she has done a ton of work way outside of what DevX has done. But she's going to share with you now some actual kind of practical pieces of what this looks like in her school.
All right. Oh, sorry, you already switched that. Let me go back. All right. So my name's Mary Avans, and I'm just an average second grade teacher at Barger Academy in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's a fine arts magnet school, and we're also a Title I school. We are a public school. We have about 400 students, and we're K through 5th grade. And I've taught for 13 years, 9 years there at Barger. I've also been a STEM fellow, and I put that in because I think it's important to where I got to using computer science. Being in STEM fellows with the Public Education Foundation has really supported my efforts to be an innovator in this area in my school and my classroom. In my school, we have no computer science classes outside of the regular education classroom. And just to jump on the back of what Michael was saying, as I've gone through DevX and STEM fellows, I've noticed talking to speaking with other teachers in high school and middle school, they are trying to teach computer science, but when our elementary students get to them, they have not had a lot of exposure. So they're building a foundation and right when they get to middle school or high school, and they don't have anything that's already there necessarily because it's not offered in elementary school. So let me go to the next slide. Tonight I'm going to just stay true to my passion for teaching, and I'm going to go through the 5 W's and the how of how to integrate computer science just based on my experience. So I live in Chattanooga, which is one of the leading nations, leading the nation in the frontier of technology. And so for making the case of why we should do this, Chattanooga is one of the first to offer the 10 gigabit, or the gig. We're the gig city now, and it's 100 times faster than any other, gig nationwide. So this has drawn in a lot of entrepreneurs and startup companies, and this has given us a new identity, which also has led to new jobs that are available in our community. We have healthcare that is innovative, 3D printing companies, and a lot of software design networks in our city. So I'm sure this might be happening in your city also. If you look at the slides, I've put up a couple of pictures of companies that I've been able to see through going through STEM fellows. They took us into some startups that are available, that are here in Chattanooga, and one is the largest 3D printer, and this is the Branch Technology company, and it has the largest freeform 3D printer. Let's see. If you look to the left there of the 3D printer, they have a matrix, and they're wanting to build buildings with this. And so you can imagine this is going to be revolutionary for our city and the world. And then to the right, there's another startup called Feet. And these shoes that you see are 3D printed shoes personally made for you as when you get your foot lined up with the computer. It takes a picture of your foot, puts it into the computer, and then they 3D print this out. So even shoes are going to be made different. So this is like a real-world reason why we should be getting our kids future ready with computer science. Let's see. I have a little stat down here that everybody always throws out, but it's pretty amazing. It says by the year 2020, there will be 1 million more jobs than computer science professionals available. So that's pretty a stark reality that we need to start getting our students ready. So let's see. Some of the skills that are available that I have seen my kids use are critical thinking, collaboration, and problem solving as they're doing these things that I'm going to show you in a little while as they're doing some coding and programming and working with robots. So, all right, we're going to go on. One of the things that is hard for us as teachers is as we're isolated, especially in elementary, I think, we're isolated in our own environments, our classrooms. We don't really know what's going on out in the local companies and factories. And so it's kind of a long way for us to think getting our students ready to work in a company or factory and what skills they're going to need. But as I went through the STEM Fellows, we went out and did some field trips. And that was a real revelation for me because no longer are our employees working on a line as a laborer, but in the middle of these companies is a robot doing the work. And then on the side are all these programmers working in this small little room telling the robot or what to do. And so it's all automated. And then there's some support around that is a little bit of laborers. So it was real eye-opening to me. And so it really made me realize that I need to start helping my students be literate in this type of, work that they're going to be doing eventually, even starting in elementary. So I just encourage you, if you have not been in a factory lately, I highly recommend you go because it will just open your eyes to where our students will be. And it's going to be changing even before they get there in, 20 years, right? All right, moving to the next slide, I put up a graphic, the 10 reasons to teach coding, and I just want to highlight a couple of these. This was done by the program director, Brian Aspinall. He's a STEM educator at the Fair Change Learning, and he created this sketch note, so I just want to give him props for that. If you look at number 7, I just find this very important, and it's something that kids doing in all other areas, like in math and reading and science. So problem solving, critical thinking, analytical skills, those are all, found in coding, and it's a good justification for doing computer science. And then number 8 is my top. Coding is a new type of literacy. And I say this to all my coworkers, you got to be doing it. It's a new literacy. It's going to help students be able to be prepared for the future. And I like how Michael said he'd rather his daughter be able to do some programming than be able to read. It's a priority to read, but coding or programming, computer science is where it's at. All right, going on to the when. When should we do this? So as a teacher, an elementary teacher, I don't know if your day's like mine, but it's already planned out, scheduled out. We told when we need to do math, when we need to do science and reading. And so finding time to pre-teach computer science in isolation and pre-teach some skills that we might be able to integrate, that's really difficult to do. So here's some ideas on the slide of when I do it. So I give students the opportunity to do computer science coding during independent or purposeful practice. So when they're going to be listening to a story on the computer throughout the week at different times for reading, I give them the opportunity one day of the week to do code.org or something like that. They can go on and do their account. And so the same can be done for math independent practice. They can go, I would do that for their opportunity to do it a separate time. It can also be done to enhance a lesson. I'm going to show you a lesson I recently did. And then also to launch a project-based learning activity or to culminate it. And something I've done, my students take home their passwords for all their computer science opportunities, and they go home and do it, and their parents get educated on it as well. We host STEM night and computer science night, and we promote the Computer Science Week. And so these things are just getting it out there and exposing our students to computer science. And then also, I'll tell you in a little while, my coworker and I do STEM Fridays, and we get together, and it's just math chaos, but we just have a great time doing STEM and computer science, and we try to base it around whatever we're doing in the humanities, especially science. All right, that's the when. So now we're going to go on to the how. So here was my process for getting started. So I know computer science is a literacy that my students need exposed to. And, you know, when someone tells you that, it seems like one more thing to do. But you can start small. And so what I did is I picked one app or program, and I trained my students how to use it. And then there's also unplugged activities. If you don't have enough devices, then there's some activities you can do without having to have devices. They're called unplugged. I didn't used to know what that was, but now I do. And so I'll share some of those resources in a little while. So you pick an app or program, and then you pick a subject area where you think you might could integrate it. And then I think you can also reverse this. You could pick a subject area and then go look for an app or a program that might address a standard or a strategy that you're trying to teach. So I would just encourage you to jump in and don't be scared. The kids won't be scared. And just give it a try. Find a program and then try to match it up with a subject or a standard. And I recently have done this with math, and I'll show you that lesson in a little while, a few slides later. And when I began to do this, okay, I've lost my PowerPoint. Hold on just a minute, tap something off. There we go. When I began to do this, I had to kind of backwards plan. I was thinking about what skills my students need to apply in the computer science, and then how to get them there, and then what they needed to apply in math. So let's see. So I began to teach the computer science some pre-skills, and then I shifted it to applying it to the humanities course. So, you know, here's how to code this, to go left, to go right, to go forward. But then, okay, now how can we apply this to measurement is what my lesson is going to be. Let's see, I think I jumped ahead a little bit. So let's see. So I'm kind of challenging myself right now as I'm planning out my unit to always be thinking, where can I substitute, supplement, or enhance an activity with computer science instead of maybe a worksheet or I don't know, something else, an activity where they're doing something hands-on. So looking at what app can I use or what program. And collaborating with a teammate is a great thing because you can just bounce ideas off of each other. I have an example here on the slide where there's this is something I use in class where students draw in the boxes something that happened first, next, last, or then and last. it might have to do with a story that they're reading. But in coding or computer science, maybe they do that for an avatar that they're doing, trying to get it somewhere to the next thing. Those are found also in coding. And so those exact same words are used, and that's a standard. I'm going to go to the next page, and these are some ideas that teachers have had integrating this thing, how computer science is shown in with the standards. So cause and effect is on here with the first standard, and it's in most grade levels, I think, cause and effect. And this program, you can find that standard addressed in block programming coding, as seen down at the bottom on the left. These are, well, I think that's the SDN, sorry. So, yeah, the SDN, that's another standard. Yeah, I'm sorry, I got that confused up. So the cause and effect is shown in the block coding down on the bottom left. So if this happens, then this happens next. And that's just a direct example of how that standard's met. Another example or justification for this is that in the middle, students are exposed to a lot of vocabulary. And so words like algorithm or binary, these are just real-world words that they need to know eventually. And so it's a literacy that they need to get through middle school and high school as they want to be learning computer science. All right, I'm going to go to just the next slide where we have some math examples of integrating the computer science with math. And just to hit a couple of these, let's see, the one with standard 4085. I thought this was interesting, creating looping or repeated coding, how you can relate that to the multiplication standard where things are repeated and patterns over and over. And I thought students could write a multiplication standard that would go, multiplication equation that would match the looping that they're doing in the coding, and or write about it. How is this the same as multiplication? So there's some other ideas, great ideas in there. Using the Frozen app to work with angles and measurement, and that's found on code.org. Okay, we're going to go on to the next one. And so this is a lesson that I did. Just want to just quickly tell you about one thing I just randomly did this week. I got the kids to do an unplugged activity with their spelling words, and I had them code a few of their spelling words in binary code, and then they had to give it to a friend, and the friend had to decode it. And that was just a great unplugged, quick way for them to be doing coding. They didn't necessarily know they were coding, although I told them, they just haven't realized how it connects yet, because they're second graders. All right, so let's see. I'm going to go on to the next one. So do you guys, one of the times that you provided for students exploring coding or computer science, I just wanted to ask you a question, because I'm not able to keep up with all the questions over here. I might ask you, have you been able to integrate this in your classroom and other times than when? And then I'm going to share my lesson here. So this is a recent integration, and before I started this, I wanted to integrate robots in my classroom because I had the opportunity to use the Autobot. And so I knew that we were going to be studying measurement, and I wanted to use the Autobots. So Autobots are robots that scan color patterns, and those patterns relate to a code. So if it's like black, green, blue, that means for the robot to do something. Maybe turn left or turn right or spin around, something like that. And it follows a path. So I started with that idea, and then I knew we were going to be teaching measurement. So I kind of started that backwards plan idea. So figured out how to get those two to meet, the Autobots and the measurement. So over 2 weeks, I taught 3 lessons of computer science, teaching them how they work and how to code them, and that was kind of to prep them. And then I simultaneously taught the lesson on measurement, teaching them what yards are, inches, centimeters, and how to use the tools for that. So the top picture shows them exploring and trying to figure out the code for the Autobots, and they had to kind of decode the Autobots. How's it working? What's it do when it gets to that color? I didn't really just give it to them. So they realized the color combinations, and then I actually gave them the cipher for it that showed the coding. And then I got to let them, I gave them the cipher, and they got to explore using and actually coding it specifically. And then they wrote about that in independent writing time. So then these two things came together. They knew how to use the Autobots. They knew how to measure. And so it was like a culminating activity in measurement and almost an assessment, so I could see if they could measure what a yard was, or 2 feet in centimeters, and using the right tools. And so I showed them and I gave them a real-world purpose. So I showed them a picture of how factories use real robots to make work easier, like an automation kind of thing. And I told them that Volkswagen wanted them to make a path to make a robot go, and I gave them specific things: 1 yard, and then turn left, 2 feet, and turn right, and then go 30 centimeters, and then the robot had to spin around. And so they were so excited. They thought they really were going to do this for Volkswagen. I didn't tell them otherwise. So the students worked in groups. I kind of grouped them heterogeneously based on the students' skill set, and then I gave them each job. There was a robot master, a tools master, and so they were in charge of the rulers and the markers they had to use. There was a misconception master, and that person had to look for misconceptions and help the group fix it and stay on track. And a code master, so they had the cipher of what the codes were, and they had to relay those to the group. And then a graphic master, someone that would do the drawing part. And so I don't think this was a little video, but I don't think it came through. And so the students worked together, and they did some critical thinking, some problem solving, because it wasn't always working out. And they did some collaboration, and some, it achieved the goal really quickly, and some had to problem solve and really work hard to persevere to get to the goal. And so they were all successful, although some struggled a little bit longer than others, and but they got to the end. And then I got some data. I could tell who still needed to work on centimeters and inches, and knowing what 2 feet was, or any of those standards I was trying to cover. And then we had some debriefing afterwards. Let's see. So going on to the next slide, this just kind of shows how it all came together, how the computer science worked with a real-world purpose, and they used all these skills, and it got them to the learning goal, which was really to use the measurement tools and show me that they understood how to use those. So you can see in the picture how they're working together, and I don't know if you have any questions about that. Can I answer any questions? Okay, I don't know. Moving on. So it gave them a platform to apply their knowledge for a real purpose, and I think that really got them excited, and then they're building those skills. I put in some resources for you, but I want to give you a few more that I really enjoy using in the classroom. A An app that I enjoy is the Food, and then the Tinker is another, Tynker, and Making, and then Scratch and Scratch Junior. And those are just a few of the ones that are out there available. The kids can work with these in second grade, and they're all applicable. And they have great resources on them too for integration. A lot of apps and programs are putting them on their website right now, how to integrate it and giving you ideas. And you can also submit ideas. So a lot of times teachers don't have devices. We might have Chromebooks, but we don't have iPads, or we have iPads and we don't have Chromebooks or laptops or Macs or whatever you need. So I just want to give you some resources for getting materials. Of course, Donors Choose and even code.org. And then I put community foundations. A lot of public education foundations are in the, nationwide, and so they're really good to loan you materials. That's where I borrowed the Ozobots from, and they have other robots and coding things available, Theros and things like that. So also businesses, I've learned to just go ask. So if I go to this factory and I just say, hey, I need some money, you're going to need some kids to run your robot in 20 years, and I've got the kids, but I have no robots, they will give you some money. And then First Lego League is a great way to get kids interested in coding and doing robots. And they have grants, and you can also compete. I got to experience that last month locally. So if you ever have that in your community, go check out the First Lego League. It's really cool. All right. And then we always want to kind of have the classroom management part, right? Like, how's this going to work, and what do they need to do, and how am I going to control all this chaos, right? So first thing I did, I set some norms, how to handle the devices or the robots, and we've learned how to communicate over the past few months. I've learned to release the learning, not to be in control of it. Let them get in there. Let them get in there and fail, and get in there and learn with them. And if it doesn't work out, do it again next week. So having the students work in pairs. If you're starting out with having them to learn to code, it's always good to have them in groups of 3 or 2. And then they can problem solve together, because somebody always has a different idea. And then learn from your students. You're going to find out their little brains are open to how to figure it out. And my older brain, I'm like, I don't know. But then they come up with this idea I didn't even think of. And then learn from the failure, and teach them to learn from the failure. And I think just the overall idea is that exposure is the goal. Just keep exposing them to it, because that's better than nothing, because they need some basis or foundation for middle school and high school. All right. And I think that's about all that I have. But I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mary. And yeah, feel free. Anybody, feel free to jump in with questions. These are always a little bit challenging, not knowing if we're talking to classroom teachers, or Jill introduced herself as a resource teacher. That's awesome. And so just as the crowd in a webinar is always diverse, and you just never know the background, sometimes the interaction's a little bit challenging. I wanted to just highlight a couple of things towards the end that Mary was sharing. Some of the specific things. One of the things she mentioned was one of her favorite apps, especially for early elementary, is from the Foos. And I had an article. I'll put the link in. Let's see here. I'll put the link in the chat window. There was a really interesting article from NPR, as it was, that came out about a year and a half ago, that quotes the CEO from the Foos, and we know him well. He's actually going to be our guest in the 4th of this series of webinars, talking about some very specific practical strategies. What we love about the Foos, which is made by CodeSpark Academy, it is a there's absolutely no reading involved. So to be able to use the app, to be able to engage in this high level problem solving, computational thinking, and really true computer science and coding, the students are not required to read at all. I started my youngest daughter on it when she was 3, and it hooked her in a way that I just hadn't seen before, and it was just fascinated by. We were fortunate enough to connect with Grant Hosford from CodeSpark, and you'll see him mentioned in this article a couple of times. It just makes a really compelling case for why we should be teaching computer science in elementary school, and really sort of congruent with what we were talking about at the beginning, that teachers are hungry for ways. The reality is teachers got into the business to really make an impact and a difference in kids' lives. And we know in elementary school especially, it's just there's such foundational work being done, from developing number sense to literacy skills, to social skills, right? To those soft skills like collaboration and problem solving, as Mary was highlighting. And as we start to work towards developing those in students, any tool that helps us do that better is really a good thing, unless it detracts from other goals. And what this article kind of highlights is the value of some of these emerging tools like Scratch, like the FOOs. So with DevX specifically, we've actually partnered formally with Makey and with the FOOs. So we use the FOOs in early elementary until students are established readers, so kind of K through 2, while they're still developing their foundational reading skills. Once they are established, we move them out of the FOOs and into Scratch, because Scratch does have some reading involved. It's still not particularly heavy, but for my 4-year-old, she couldn't read, and she certainly couldn't read at a level that was necessary to be able to operate in a coding environment, like in a programming environment. What we loved about the FOOs is that it has this removal of a literacy requirement. But it doesn't do that at the cost of rigor. So there's still complex problem solving that's required. What we love there is that they have gamified it so that students, as they're progressing, they really are just playing a video game. It feels very much like a video game, and they accidentally start using language like, I'll never forget when a couple years ago, my 4-year-old looks at me and says, I guess it's a year ago, she looks at me and says, don't tell the character to go forward 6 times, just use a loop. And for my 4-year-old to talk to me about using language like looping and really understanding some concepts of coding and efficiency in coding, was really fascinating. It really kind of drove us to really think deeply about how we could do this. And then when we go into classrooms like Mary's at Barger, Barger Academy is a school with very diverse demographics, from socioeconomic to ethnicity. They have a wide range of students, and as a fine arts school, it's really been interesting to go in and see what they do with their students there, in terms of computer science. To see Mary, and we had her colleague Nikki Russell in the last webinar, to see what they're doing with those students is just really, it really is unlocking a whole new world for these kids. At the end of the day, when we think about computer science in elementary school, and I'll shut up in just a moment, so you can feel free to throw some questions in, and obviously feel free to type them in the chat window anytime. When we think about CS in elementary school, for me as a veteran teacher, I know, and there's a wealth of resource or research out there that supports this idea that putting students in contextually relevant scenarios increases the depth of learning. So when we see kind of in this big project-based learning movement that's gone on for the last more than a decade and a half, I guess now, we know that as students' skills develop, the more we can give them authentic forums to problem solve in, the deeper, like a deeper level or higher level learning happens. The challenge is that in elementary school, because they lack some foundational skills, they're still developing those skills. It's very difficult to put students in authentic problem solving situations. You can't turn them over, you can't give them access to a table saw and a laser cutter and a CNC router and say, go build some fancy thing that's a product for your problem, because I don't want my 7-year-old doing that. But with computer science, it's solving that problem. It's meeting students in a world where, as digital natives, they don't know how to create with the computer natively, but they do know how to play with the computer. Right? They do know how to use devices for play and to engage in with a device on a consumer level. What computer science is allowing elementary students to do is to play in that same domain that they're already comfortable with, that they already are experiencing, that they already enjoy, that they experience deep levels of engagement with. But now if we can place opportunities to problem solve there, we can really meet them where they're at in this sort of contextually relevant scenario, and we can sort of sneak in those critical standards for the foundational skills, the number sense, the literacy skills that we need. I think it's just a really tremendous opportunity, and we're more than happy. Feel free to reach out to Mary or myself. We do a lot of work with DevX. We do this work nationally. We'd be happy to talk with your school, with your district, about coming out and working with you. And I'll be quiet now and open up the floor. Feel free to offer any questions or certainly suggestions. If you have brought CS to your classroom or your school, we'd love to hear from you.
Michael and Mary, I'll jump in here. This is Melissa. You both sort of touched on this a little bit, but for those that are interested in launching this work and perhaps dealing with either school or district administrators that aren't quite on board with it yet, and maybe feeling the pressure of, but we've got to make sure these test scores are where they need to be, or time is limited. We don't have any extra time to do this other stuff. What would you what kind of a succinct argument or response would you give to that to help them understand how this certainly can, meet twofold goals and not set those things aside for the sake of computer science?
You're asking me? Yeah? Okay. So I did have this in my notes to say, and I just kind of skipped over it, but I do justify it with and I don't have to justify it so much with my administrator, but with, if someone came in my room, I could justify it. It is a literacy that they are going to need as they go forward, and it is touching many of the standards. So I don't feel like I would have a hard time justifying it other than they're learning a language, and it's a programming language, and it's vocabulary. So there's many standards it hits, and they are learning, and it's not just playing, not just having fun, but they're learning lots of skills, and that apply to many other things in the classroom. So those skills transfer over, and it's a literacy.
And I would say, to pick up on that too,
leave it at that.
Thank you.
I'd say that to piggyback on that, I think part of the argument here is sort of what we've talked about. It's not detracting from time, right? And that theme is repeated in that NPR article. It doesn't take time away from those foundational skills that we all have to teach, and we believe are important, right? Instead, it enhances how we can teach those, right? It really does give us a domain to embed those skills, so it's not just drill and kill, so it's not contrived learning. We've all done a train leaves Boston and a train leaves Chicago problem in a math class, and the problem is none of our kids ride trains. And so if they've never taken a train ride from Boston to Chicago, right? This is a...
Don't say that, Michael. I just did a train math problem today. It didn't make any sense.
It becomes this totally foreign domain,
anyway,
right? And so if we can put them in a domain that is something they're experiencing daily, that they see, that they're already engaged with, it removes a burden, really. It really empowers teachers to not have to create an engaging hook, because the CS becomes the hook. And I'd also argue that there's an element in computer science that you basically, especially, so I mean, we're talking about computer science. It's not just programming. What we've talked about today has focused primarily on programming because it's the most tangible, and certainly it's a fundamental component. But computer science also encompasses things like computational thinking, like debugging, like analyzing something, analyzing a sequence of events to identify, potential outcomes or potential pitfalls. Well, when you think of that rhetoric, that really is a literature. That's a literacy device in reading. Right? When we're trying to teach reading with third and fourth grade standards all over the place about thinking about, can I read and identify context from what's written? Can I anticipate events? Do I see proper sequences of events? Those skills are analogous in computer science, just like they are in traditional literacy. And I certainly think that there's just tremendous opportunity there.
Yeah. Can I
Thank
add
you.
a couple things that just have come to mind? One of the things I've seen in using computer science in my classroom is those students that are low level in other subject areas. Maybe they struggle reading, or they struggle in reading math problems and then doing the math and bringing all that together. They are the ones that just shine during computer science, during the opportunities I give them to program or code, and those are the ones that just take off with this because they're able to be successful. Is also a great thing to see, and so I would just say that's another reason just to give it a try. Also, I just want to say that as I started this journey, no one made me go down this journey. I just saw that it needed to be done, and I just went out and started learning it on my own. So I'm, seeking it out, trying it, giving it a try, and just jumping out there is just really important.
And I guess from a practical standpoint too, look online for resources to help you advocate. If you're in a school where the administration doesn't see the value, or in a district where the central office doesn't see the value in computer science, there's a wealth of resources online. I mean, the CS for All Teachers is a wonderful resource to go look at with advocacy pieces, as well as code.org certainly has a whole section of their website dedicated to how do you convince parents that it matters. Although we're finding more and more parents do believe it matters and it should be there. But in a world that still is very much test centered, we know that with administrators and with central office personnel, certainly teachers still have to make a case in many instances, and there are a number of resources out there to provide sort of data-driven advocacy tools. Oh,
one of the things I'd also like to add is, as Nikki and I started doing this in our school, we've also done some, and we've got comfortable with it, we've also done some professional development for our staff just to kind of push them, let's do computer science week this week, and we introduced our code to them and got them all doing it, all the staff, and then take it to your students now and just starting there. So, if you're trying to be an innovator in your school, it's a great way to start.
And I was going to note too in the comments in the chat window, I just put a link up from Dr. Marina Bears. She's one of the many things that has come out of her work is this Kinder Lab robotics, which is I don't mean to push their products. I have no ties with their products at all, but it is really fascinating work. And if you're looking for kind of a research-based case for why to bring computer science and kind of just to support kind of research-based rationale to bring computer science to the elementary school level, it is a wonderful starting point for sure. And very palatable.
Thank you. Any other questions for Michael and Mary? Well, I'm sure that they both would be willing. I know that Michael has offered up his email address, and I'm sure that Mary would be willing to give hers as well. Before we close out, I did want to just mention a few upcoming activities. Most of you are probably at the elementary level that's on this. So this first webinar on February 21st, we do encourage you to share with your high school colleagues. We're going to be doing a webinar about using the AP reference sheet for APCS principles, one of the high school courses in computer science. We're also hosting a webinar on February 22nd around impact and connections and thinking about the way that computer science influences and impacts our society. And then on March the 1st, this is one that many of you may be interested in, we're going to do a kind of a repeat of one we've done previously around funding for computer science resources and support. We may have a second guest, but I know for sure we'll have Kirk Smiley from DonorsChoose.org, who will be here to talk about all the wonderful options that they provide in terms of getting support for your classroom, including an upcoming summer program for getting access to some professional development over the summer. So we hope you will certainly take advantage of these. If you're not already a member of the CS for All Teachers community, we do encourage you to join that as well. When you sign up for registration, I just put the link in the window here, but when you sign up for registration, we ask what grade levels you teach, and so if you select that you're a part of elementary, then you'll automatically be added to a special CS and elementary group that we have. So it's an asynchronous discussion group where you can post questions, you can add resources, you can just learn from other colleagues at the elementary level who are working to do similar things with computer science. So we hope that you will take advantage of these opportunities. I know Philip asked earlier about whether or not the presentation will be shared, and absolutely it will be. We post the presentation as well as the recording link and also a little webinar recap that kind of summarizes what we've talked about as well as provides some related resources. We always post that. The link and the presentation should be up by probably tomorrow afternoon. The recap may take a few more days, but I put the link to where the event posting is on our website. You can just bookmark that and come back later and access all of that information at once. But thank you, Michael and Mary, for being here. This is great. I love the ideas that were shared, and really just appreciate you sharing your experience. And we thank you all so much, and hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good night and take care.